First, just great and grateful to be here. Thanks to Wendy and everyone for setting this up. Today, I wanted to talk about Earth Species Project, which is using frontier AI to decode animal communication. We'll get a little bit into what that means. But first, let's start with a guessing game. What animal makes this sound? No, whale's a good guess, not a penguin. Narwhal's getting closer, but also not a whale. It is a bearded seal. Pretty much if I ended my talk here, it would be perfect. But it turns out that this is the mating call of a bearded seal. So if you guys got excited, now you know where to go. But the reason why I like starting here is because when we imagine what sounds animals make in the communication, we don't really know. We just think like cow, maybe humpback whale. But there is a huge range of what sounds animals make that we've never heard. Can you guys guess what animal made that sound? Not a frog. Yes, it was a bird. It's one of these. It's just a standard carrion crow. And what it turns out in the last couple of years is around, there's no really good estimate of this, but around 80% of the sounds that animals make are quiet calls that they just make very close to each other that science has never looked at because we haven't been able to record it, and then when we have, it's too complex. And so this is where your ears just start perking up. You're like, oh, the super majority of communication that animals make, science has never got a chance to look at. That's very exciting. And it'd be sort of like trying to figure out how human beings communicate just by listening to our shouts, which would be awkward. And maybe a little bit like Twitter. All right, this is the most humble graph that I know. Why humble? Because it only includes all of time and all of space on it. But you can see, and I drew this graph not to scale, because otherwise the human experience would be tiny. The vast majority of the experiences of the world, we never get we never experience. And so I'll give a couple more examples here. So one of our partners, Joyce Poole, was able to discover last year with AI models that elephants have unique names that they call each other by. Parents spend the first couple weeks of their chick's life leaned over their chicks, whispering a unique name that they will then use for the rest of their lives. Right? What's more fundamental than identity? And while I'm talking mostly about animal communication, I just wanted to throw this out. Do you think plants can hear? And obviously, by the way I'm asking this question, the answer has to be yes. But a 2019 University of Tel Aviv study did this amazing thing where they played different sounds to primrose flowers, high pitch, low pitch, and only when they played the sound of an approaching pollinator, like a bee, did the flowers respond by producing more and sweeter nectar in around 3 seconds. And so quite literally, the flower hears the bee and gets excited. Whoever whistled is correct. Our ability to understand is limited by our ability to perceive, and AI is throwing open the aperture of that which we can perceive. But let's go the next step. Like if we're talking about decoding animal communication, being able to understand the languages of whales and dolphins, is there even really a there? And we were really excited when we first started the project to discover this 1994 study at the University of Hawaii where they taught dolphins 2 gestures. The first gesture was do something you've never done before, right? Innovate. Already a very complex thing to communicate and requires understanding the concept of negation, understanding the concept of innovation, but they can do it. They would then teach the dolphins a second gesture, together. Do something together. And they would say to dolphin pairs, do something you've never done before, together. And the dolphins go down, exchange sonic information, and when they come up, they do the same thing they've never done before at the same time. And you're like, okay. if it isn't language, what are they doing? I think it puts the burden of proof on the other foot. But of course, if we're going to do something like translate a animal language, well, that doesn't already have a Rosetta Stone. How could we possibly translate a language that doesn't already have a Rosetta Stone? And this was impossible up until 2017, when the AI community figured out how to do exactly that. How does it work? Well, the way AI sees, if you know technically, these things are called embeddings, but this is how AI sees language. This is English, the top 10,000 most spoken words. The stars that are near each other represent words that mean similar things. Stars or words that have a shared relationship, share a distance and direction, so sort of relationship becomes geometry. And the way this works then is that if you imagine, this shape is English, this point here is dog. Well, dog has relationship to friend, to guardian, to howl, yelp, fur. It sort of fixes it in a point in space. And if you solve the multidimensional Sudoku puzzle of how every concept relates to every other concept, you get this rigid structure that represents language. Now, the computer doesn't know what anything means. It just knows how they interrelate. So you get a rigid structure representing the relationships of a language, and this was the core insight. Could you just take the shape, which is Spanish, and the shape, which is English, and rotate one on top of the other? And if you did, do they match? And if you talk to anthropologists, they'd say, no way. But the machine learner's like, whatever, GPUs are cheap, make them go brr, and it worked. Now, they're not exactly the same shape because there are words in one language that don't exist in another, but they're close enough that the point which is dog ends up in the same spot in both. And then you're probably going to say, well, English and Spanish are super related, but it works with German and Japanese, Esperanto, Finnish, Aramaic, Urdu. Pretty much every human language fits in a universal human meaning shape that lets you translate to and from them with no Rosetta Stone, which I just find so beautiful, right? Like in a time of such deep division that AI can show us there's a unique structure that unifies us all. How cool is that? And of course, the first thought after this is, well, can we build these shapes for animal communication? And if we do that, which parts overlap? And would that let us do direct translation? Now, the next thing you might say, though, is, well, maybe we all share this kind of shape, because language is a shadow of the world. It's a model of the world. Our brains are the same. Our senses are the same. So these shapes should be the same. But whales are so different. Sperm whales spend 80% of their life a kilometer deep in complete darkness, seeing with sound. Their worldview might be very different. But here's what's interesting, and this honestly deserves a talk in and of itself, but these shapes, it turns out all AI models, no matter what they make and what modality you train them on, are starting to find the same shapes. And so if you guys know DALL-E, I'm assuming, and all of the image generation, mid-journey stuff, well, this is how it works. You build a shape that represents languages, the AI builds a shape that represents images, you look at image caption pairs, that creates a alignment between them, then you just type portrait of Chile as a person, it finds the right spot in image space, and boom, it makes that image. It's actually very profound that every modality, whether it's DNA, images, code, all can be put into sort of a joint space. But it's another thing, come find me later, we can talk about that because it's very interesting. But this is what gives us hope that translating to animal language when their worldviews might be very different is possible. This, by the way, was my face when I first saw all of this. So we end up with this maxim. Everything that can be translated will be translated. We're on this journey. We think we can probably figure out what animals are saying by 2030. And, we've talked about some of the, why would we expect there to be much alignment whatsoever? Well, I just want to give two examples here. Do you guys know the mirror test? This is where you paint a dot on an animal, you show them a mirror. They didn't know about the dot before. They look in the mirror, they start getting off the dot or investigating it. And that shows that they have to associate that thing in the mirror, that is me, self-awareness. So these are dolphins looking into a mirror, checking out the inside of their mouths, having possibly the most universal mammalian experience, which is you look in a mirror and you have to check out your abs. right? It turns out elephants also pass the mirror test. A number of species do, but it took scientists a long time to figure out that elephants pass the mirror test because they were using small mirrors, which just sort of shows you, like, humans. But if animals are communicating, they may well be communicating about rich interiority, self-awareness, consciousness, the deepest thing that we have. Here's another example. These are lemurs taking hits off of centipedes. So they find these centipedes, they bite into them, they get high off of the venom, they get all trance-like, and they get super cuddly. It's essentially proto-Burning Man. And it turns out these are not the only animals that like to shift their state of consciousness to reach for transcendence. Dolphins, for instance, intentionally inflate pufferfish, get into a circle, sort of bounce them around, getting high off of their venom, and it's sort of the original puff, puff, pass. And chimps will get onto vines and spin. There's sort of like a proto-whirling dervish. Like, many animals seem to seek altered states of consciousness, and if they're communicating, they may well be communicating about their experience of transcendence. So while I think we can guess that animals certainly are going to gossip, it may go much deeper than that. All right. I know I'm nearing the end of my time, but I can't resist another guessing game. What animal makes this sound? Any guess? Raccoon? Raccoon, no. Not a fox, but what does the fox say? These are beluga. And beluga, like, you heard all of that sort of digital sounding stuff? That's them. If this is just a microphone in water, and we communicate we can hear up to 20 kilohertz, they're communicating up to 150 kilohertz. And it turns out they communicate in these modem-like packets. And Dr. Valeria Vergara, one of our partners, is able to show that they include in their hellos, they include their name and their clan identity. This is who I am, this is where I'm from. But that's the only thing so far really that's been decoded. And this is why this problem is so hard. This is what belugas are like in the wild. So even when you have what's known as a whaleable, like a Fitbit for a whale, that lets you listen to how they move, sorry. So you get like motion, you get audio and video. Even then, one whale will often be speaking into the microphone of another whale, so it's hard. So it requires AI to separate it all out. And here is sort of like the mind-blowing stat, is that Dr. Valeria Vergara was only able to use 3% of her data because she couldn't tell who was speaking or they were overlapping. And so you're like, okay, 97% of the most vocal underwater species with the greatest vocabulary is completely opaque to science and requires frontier AI to be able to tease it apart so we can start to research it. And this, I think, is the theme I want to leave you all with, which is like our ability to understand is limited by our ability to perceive. Our ability to perceive has been so very narrow, and it's about to be blown wide open. Because I'm sort of at the end of time, what I might do is sort of skip forward a little bit. We just, by the way, it's coming out in ICLR, published the first sort of like large-scale foundation model for nature. So let's anyone sort of like type to a data set. And the very interesting thing here is twofold. One, we're starting to see those incredible emergent behaviors. This model can name a species by name that it has never heard before, which is a crazy thing. And two, and this is the really hopeful one, that we're starting to see what's known as positive domain transfer, which is a technical term for something very simple, which is to say when you train these models on human speech and human music first, it gets much better at doing all of the tasks on animal communication. What does that mean? That means there is something in the structure and semantics and meaning of human communication and music that is helpful. Those patterns are conserved in animal communication, which is starting to prove out our first hypothesis that these shapes will be alignable. So we're sort of at this place now. I don't get to tell you about these awesome crows, just too bad. Oh, but I sort of want to tell you about this. Am I allowed to? Yeah? Okay. So one of the animals we're working on with are these crows with the University of Lyon. They have little backpacks, nest cam, and what's cool about these guys is that normally crows, they raise their chicks in pairs, but these guys come together, lots of families, and they do communal child raising. So it's almost like a commune or a kibbutz. And no other group of crows seems to have this. They have their own unique dialect and vocabulary to do this culture. They will take outside adults in, teach them their dialect, and then they will start participating in their culture. It's very cool. And a lot of what we've been doing then is sort of figuring out how do we align the sounds of individuals to the behaviors of groups and vice versa. And what we found already is that there are these, there's a specific call that our AI picked up, which the birds make when they get home. So they land and they make this sort of soft cooing sound. And that means to the chicks, like, honey, I'm home, get ready to be fed. But there's one bird, the human name is Rosa, who's a mother that for whatever reason the other crows do not like, and they bully her. And so whenever she lands at the nest, they all chase her off. And our model is able to pick up that actually she starts making the honey, I'm home call a little bit louder while she's circling the nest, and then she lands, quickly feeds, and then heads off. And it really gives you a sense that as we start getting into this is not just going to be, decode animal language. It's going to be getting down to the individual personalities of specific beings. But I think this ability to translate from audio to behavior is key. And to give one example, do you guys know about dolphin and whale strandings? No. A couple of people do. Very strange behavior. It's been picking up, at least in some populations since 2020, where whales start doing this. They get into big groups, they start communicating very differently, they get very agitated, and then they beach themselves. That is, this is a kind of mass stranding, mass suicide. It looks sort of like that. No one knows why. Some people think it's sonar, but they start communicating very differently. What may be possible as we get a little further is figure out, how do you talk them off the ledge? How do you intervene? This kills many, many whales. All right, final, I'll just sort of like speed through to the end, which is, where we are now, we're sort of a GPT-2 era tech. We're like a nonprofit. We've been on a small budget. Reid Hoffman just gave us a big infusion. We're sort of doing a bigger raise because now is the time. It's impossible without scale, but inevitable to do this with scale. We started working on we build the foundational technology. We're starting to now work on the verticals. Which species are we going to go really deep with? One across every major group. And I'll just end with this. But why are we doing all this in the first place, besides that it's just sort of awesome? How many people here saw My Octopus Teacher? And how many people stopped eating octopus? So I'd say maybe like 3/4 of people stopped. And what I find so interesting about this is that, did the film ever say feel bad or feel shame or that human beings are bad? Never did. It came through the side door of love and awe, compassion. It's a very different theory of change for how we as humans can wake up to the fact that we are disconnected from ourselves, from each other, from the natural world. If you're to think about what is the through line among all of our different biggest problems, whether it's runaway inequality or climate instability, it's a narrow optimization at the expense of the whole, focusing on some part, breaking the big picture. And that's just another way of saying disconnection. How powerful will it be to rewrite our story of the who we must be, to reconnect us with the rest of nature? And then I'll just end with this, which is, in 1995, I think it was December 18th, a group of astronomers pointed the Hubble telescope at an empty patch in sky. And what they discovered wasn't nothing. What they discovered was the most number of galaxies anyone had ever seen. And that gets back to, we can only understand that which we can perceive, that when we get a new scientific tool, we point it at a place that human beings thought was empty, and what we discover was not nothing but everything. And we're at that point again. And I think the hope here is that, the last time we invented something like the telescope, what did we learn? We learned that the Earth was not the center. This time, I think, what we'll discover is that humanity is not the center. So, thank you.